Meanwhile, several aid agencies and NGOs have pulled out of Syria over concerns for their safety. Médecins Sans Frontières suspended their operations in northeastern Syria yesterday. Well, joining us from Amsterdam to explain the decision is MSF's Emergency Manager for Syria, Robert Onus. Robert, good to talk to you this evening. Can you just explain then, obviously a very difficult decision for your organisation to take. Why have you felt it necessary to evacuate your staff?
Yeah, you're exactly right in that it's a difficult decision. Never do we want to have to leave a country where we're providing humanitarian assistance, and especially now in northeast Syria, when things are only getting worse. We've been there for several years. The conditions were already fragile, and so to leave now at this critical juncture is incredibly difficult. We were forced into that decision, I guess, because it was very difficult to ensure the safety of our teams. We've been working in different parts of the region, and including in some of the border areas that have come under heavy conflict, shelling and bombing. And so we were unable to be able to get the assurances of our safety and access to the population who were suffering. And it became a point where it was no longer feasible for us to continue to take those risks.
Is it the point where you cannot guarantee any safe zones in this conflict, therefore you had no choice?
It's not so much a question of safe zones. I mean, working in conflicts is always difficult, and humanitarian assistance, legally under international law should be protected. In the current situation that we have in northeast Syria, there's many different armed groups. It's difficult for us to be able to negotiate with them and to ensure that we have that access and those assurances, and that medical structures and medical personnel will be respected. And without that, it becomes incredibly difficult for us to be able to provide the assistance that we need to provide. And it's very clear that there is a huge need. I mean, that's the question.
What are the humanitarian needs that the civilian population caught up in this conflict require?
Sure. I mean, you've already alluded to it a bit in the story with this large-scale displacement, but we have to remember that also comes on top of previous displacement that's been ongoing in the region. So you have more than 100,000 people that were living in camps, including in Al Hol camp and Ainissa camp, two of the bigger ones. And that population themselves were 100% reliant on humanitarian assistance, food, for water, for medical care, for shelter. And so now their safety is also in jeopardy in those camps, and the ability for them to meet those basic needs is in jeopardy. And then on top of that, you add all this new displacement where people are fleeing into areas further south, some of them finding shelter with families and friends, but others in schools, in shops, wherever they can. And you combine all that together with this reduction in humanitarian assistance, and it becomes very fragile and frankly very concerning.
So if those organisations such as MSF are not there to provide that assistance, and as you say, these people are desperately in need of food, water and medical assistance, who do they turn to?
I mean, it's a very good question, and one that is going to be played out, I guess, over the coming days and weeks. There is some nascent capacity in the society. There are hospitals, but the ability to meet such a burgeoning need, and that need is spread across many different locations, is hard to imagine. Our concern in particular is related to the medical care and to the displaced populations, as I mentioned, but also I think very much linked to the water situation. Certainly a lot of the places in which people are being displaced does not have adequate water at the moment because the infrastructure has been damaged. And then secondarily, the other concern is winter. I mean, the Syrian winter is harsh, and it's coming very soon. And if you're living out in the open or in tents and you don't have adequate assistance or the ability to stay warm, then that becomes additionally dangerous. So, I mean, to answer your question, I don't know.
And you mentioned the large displacement of people that the conflict has created. On top of that, you speak about 100,000 plus people in the camps, the fact that they don't have access to those vital needs, will they therefore become part of that large number of people who are displaced? They'll be forced to move.
Yeah, absolutely. Already some of the camps have been relocated, or people have been relocated from the camps. If you take Ainissa camp, which is sort of in the 40 to 50 kilometers away from the border, or perhaps more like 30. I mean, already the conflict has come very close to that camp, and many people fled. Now the majority have been relocated to different camps further south. But a lot of these people are men, women, children who were displaced from the conflict in Raqqa in 2017 and are unable to go home, maybe because they don't have the money to rebuild their homes, because many of the homes were destroyed. So it's an incredibly vulnerable population, and through this conflict, that vulnerability only increases.
And what's MSF's contingencies? Have you pulled out all of your resources with the view that this will be a protracted conflict?
It's very difficult to predict what the future holds in this conflict. I don't think anyone expected that we would be in the situation we are today a couple of weeks ago. And so we always have contingency plans in place. I mean, that's part of working in an emergency environment. You need to prepare for all kinds of eventualities. But I mean, this decision and this situation does make it very difficult to be able to respond adequately to the needs that may arise, and to be able to have that reactivity to be able to respond as things change. So yeah, it's a difficult situation.
Robert Onus from MSF, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.